Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, founder and CEO at recruiting and consulting firm Riderflex. If you think today's tip or guest interview can help someone you know, please share this with them. And if you enjoy listening to our show, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button on the episodes. Finally, aside from our podcast, our day job here at Riderflex is to provide recruiting, staffing, and consulting services. You can visit riderflex.com to learn more about us and get the information on the services we provide. And now, a quick word from our sponsor and friends at Marketing 360.
Try the #1 marketing platform for small business. Everything you need from design to marketing to CRM. Learn more at marketing360.com. Marketing 360. Fuel your brand.
Liam Berryman on the Riderflex podcast for the second time. How you doing, Liam?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me, Steve. It's a pleasure to be back.
Man, I'm always watching your stuff, right? I keep an eye on you guys. You're growing, you're raising cash, doing all kinds of good stuff. Nelumbo, it's newlumbo.io for the listeners. I want to get into the company update since this is your second visit. But first, I want to know more about Liam. Last time I went back and listened to our first interview. I didn't dig in enough. I want to know more juicy stuff, more personal, more personal history. Tell us about where you grew up, your parents, siblings. Give me some early life stuff if you don't mind before we get into the company.
Wow, I honored by the request. Let's see, where can I start? So I grew up here in the Bay Area, on the peninsula in a town called San Mateo. And I was there through all the way up to early high school. And then I moved out to Colorado, actually, and completed my high school years in Colorado.
What town?
Highlands Ranch, Colorado. And I was there for 3 years and then actually came right back out to California for school at Berkeley. But my growing up, it was a wonderful time. I'm the oldest of 3 brothers.
Oh.
I did a lot of surfing when I was in middle school and early high school out here in California. In Colorado, I got very involved with things like Science Olympiad. I was very into science fiction and fantasy literature. And strategy board gaming, which I still do to this day. Not very intensely like I used to, but I still keep up with how that everything is developing. And there's a few games that I really love.
What's your favorite? What's your favorite strategy board game? I'm curious.
Oh, there's a ton, but the one that I've been playing the most over the last 2 years is a board game called Scythe. And that one is it's kind of a futuristic, dystopian futuristic one where the industrial complex kind of hasn't advanced beyond the 1950s or 60s, and so it's a agricultural and machinery and technology, and you have to kind of build your own little faction that's competing against everybody else. And
okay.
So I've done a little bit of that. Like I said,
Right.
I haven't had the time to do these kinds of things as much as I would like to. That's just been one area of interest. But yeah, grew up in San Mateo. Grew up surfing. Grew up with a lot of very cool people I'm still friends with to this day. And then parents divorced when I was in middle school.
Oh, that's right. So that's the whole California, or that's the Colorado thing. Which parent moved to Colorado?
My mom moved to Colorado, and so we were lucky enough that we lived with my mom, but we spent weekends with my dad, and so when we lived out in Colorado, he would come and visit us 2 or 3 times a month. So we would still see him really frequently, which was very nice. And out there, I did mountain biking and snowboarding and all sorts of stuff like that.
For the listeners, by the way, or for the viewers, they might notice that, I see that camera flicker, but that's okay. I think we'll just roll with it. It's all good. People know the podcast these days, they're not perfect, but let me ask you this. How did the divorce affect you? You were a young kid. What were you, a freshman in high school, and you came home one day and they're like, hey, we're getting divorced. How did that affect you?
Yeah, it happened a few years before that. I was in sixth grade actually when
Oh,
they
okay.
let us know, and then things
Okay.
got really finalized my freshman year of high school. And I do apologize for this flickering. There's a couple of adjustments I've made that I think should settle in, and we should see less of that.
Okay.
Um, but
That
you know,
had to,
I
yeah,
kind of
yeah, it
I
had to have
tell
an effect on
people,
you.
yeah, I totally did it. I told people, I tell people that I was kind of old enough to know what it meant, but young enough that I was really affected by it. My two younger brothers were kind of a little bit too young. They didn't quite, when we were told when I was in sixth grade and they were, several years younger, they didn't, it wasn't, they could tell people were sad and things were changing, but they didn't really comprehend what it meant.
Yeah.
So, it's something that I thought a lot about going into relationships and through my own personal relationships.
Mhm.
I myself am getting married June of this year, and
What?
so
All right.
yeah, going into it's one of those things that I thought a lot about the person that I ended up proposing
Mm.
to, and then how our relationship worked, and just because I'd had that experience with my parents, and it was really important to me to do the best I could to not have that kind of thing occur.
All right.
But ultimately, like looking back on it, I was very fortunate because the experience in Colorado changed a lot of the perspectives I had.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and the uh, both my parents remarried and are very happy in their current relationships. And so kind of everything has ended or continued on in a really happy manner, which is the best that you can hope for. And so I think it was
Oh,
the right thing,
good.
even if it was challenging in for a few years there.
And what type of a teenager were you? Were you, you know, down at the sheriff's office and they're calling your parents? Are you getting in car wrecks? Were you like, lots of drugs? Were you straight A
uh,
student? What, give me some details.
that's a how does one classify themselves? It's a great question right off the bat. Um, I didn't get into a lot of trouble, but I definitely looked up to people that kind of went their own way. So I was
Mm,
very resistant
mm,
to um, really fitting in with one particular boxer stereotype. I mentioned that when I was in California, spent a lot of time with people that spent a lot of time surfing and in the sports
mhm,
world.
mhm.
In Colorado, there's two different groups of people I spent a lot of time with. One were people that were doing punk rock and heavy metal shows in Denver, and the other group of people were applying to Ivy Leagues and going into engineering fields. These are all like
Wow.
various interests that I have. So
Wow.
I don't actually don't know if I fit squarely into any one of those boxes then or now, frankly. But
Mm,
those are the types
okay.
of groups of people that I hung out with, and feel
Okay.
very
So
much so having had have a richer life because of the different perspectives.
no doubt about it. And I'm sure it shaped your people skills as well to be able to navigate in those different circles and those different types of personalities for sure. Right.
Hmm.
Okay. What's the biggest trouble you ever got in? Anything you want to share? Anything cool?
Um, I got in a lot of trouble because I gave my younger brothers a hard time. I don't think there's any one particular instance, but
Okay.
I definitely felt some responsibility to, I guess, toughen them up for the real world, and that might have gone too far in a lot of cases.
Now
So
how tall are you? What are you, 6'2", 6'3"?
I'm 6'1", but I'd love to be 6'3", so you can say that if you want.
You must hire all short people then, because I saw a video of you with your troops and everybody's shorter than you. I got, so I'm
That's
giving
funny.
you, I'm
I didn't
telling you
realize
that
that.
because somebody told me that. One of my advisory board members, he calls me, what do you hire all short people so it makes it look like you're tall? Because I'm only 5'11".
Awesome.
Okay, six. So were you an athlete in high school? Did you play any sports or no?
I did the surfing. I
Okay.
did snowboarding. Those are both individual sports, obviously.
Yeah.
Never competitively. Always just amateur stuff. Though I had friends that were uh, pro or sponsored at one point in time. Um, and then I did diving, competitive diving, and
Really?
that was with a team. Yeah, and the reason for that is that for as long as I remember, I felt very comfortable and enjoyed well, anything that is adrenaline inducing, and particularly flying through the air, doing flips and leaps and jumps happens to do that. So I did gymnastics when I was very young, briefly for a couple of years.
Okay.
And so when it came time to, find some sports I could do in Colorado, I started swimming. And after about 3 swim team practices, I realized, oh, you really just go down to the end of the pool and then come back and you just keep doing that. And that was incredibly boring to me. And so when they said, hey, we're going to lose every single meet if we don't have someone, they basically created a diving team, because the way it worked is that you summed the points of what the swim team and the dive team did. And that total score was what determined which team won the overall competition every single time. And so our swim team kicked butt. They were really good, but we were losing every single meet because we would just get a 0 for the dive score. So they basically started a dive team, and they said, you don't have to know how to do anything. You just have to jump off the diving board and not get zeros. And I said, sign me up. Like, that's cool. I'll be the one to do that part. That sounds great. So then everyone would be swimming in the pool, and me and 2 other guys that joined would be practicing diving. And then whenever we got a little cold or tired, we could use the jacuzzi to warm our muscles back up while everyone was still swimming like crazy in the pool. So that worked pretty well.
That's pretty cool.
Happy with that decision.
Meanwhile, the coach probably had no idea what they were doing either, right? They're just like, yeah, jump off. Just
they got a dive coach eventually, but yeah, it was the first season was a little bit of like, yeah, we need to learn what these dives even mean. I hit the diving board a few times and all of that. That was fun. So I did that for 2.5 years in high school. Okay, a lot of sports actually.
But you were obviously a smart kid and made good grades because you got into Berkeley, right? Did you go on a scholarship or no?
No scholarship. Yeah, I would say I later in high school got really focused on academics. Freshman, sophomore year, not at all, because a lot of things were changing in my life, and it just wasn't something I focused on. But junior and senior year, I got really serious and kind of made some commitments to myself for what I wanted to do, and then went and did it, and that turned out pretty well.
And then when you got to Berkeley, you majored in stuff that was like super easy. I'm joking.
Yeah, it was a breeze.
Yeah. I mean, how did you decide? Okay, I'm going to be a biomolecular engineer. Like, what? How did you even? What your dad did this tie into what your dad or your mom did, or what? How did you decide that?
No, so and it's at Berkeley, the program is called Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering, but it's really chemical engineering is the discipline. I selected it for 2 reasons, really. One is that for as long as I can remember, I've been very interested in the entire end-to-end process of creation, not in a biblical or religious sense, but the creation of physical matter and creation and manipulation of products made out of physical matter around us. I'm very, very interested in how do we move forward physical technologies into new regimes very quickly. And chemical engineering seemed to be the widest breadth that would give me the most information to understand many different spaces, because I didn't necessarily know which exact one I wanted to go into. And then material science, which is closely related to chemical engineering and very similar to what I just described, pretty clearly became one of the disciplines I was very excited about, and where I thought there could be a lot more technology advanced to products we actually use that hasn't made it there yet for this or that reason. So that was one reason. I felt like it was a vehicle to unlock a lot of different things that I was interested in.
I see.
And then the second one is that at Berkeley, chemical engineering is it's the number 1 program at the whole school, and it's it's kind of tied for first or second chemical engineering program in the country. And I really wanted, and it's made very clear both by the program and by the people that have gone through it that it's supposed to be one of the most intense and challenging undergrads that you can do. And that's what I wanted at the time. I wanted that intensity and that challenge, and I felt like this is really the bar for excellence. And if I can see how I do against this, then that'll help me build my self-confidence, and it'll again, unlock a lot of doors for what I could potentially do.
And was it tough? Was it tough?
Yeah, it was hard. And to be clear, I didn't complete the entire program. I took a leave of absence after the first 2 years and went and started Nelumbo. So, one could say I didn't actually get to the end of it, and I didn't. But I did all of the core coursework, which was pretty tough.
Oh, so you actually didn't get your bachelor's? I didn't know that.
Correct.
You ever thought about going back?
Yeah, but I wouldn't. I never saw myself as becoming a practicing chemical engineer. I think that there's other people that are much better at it than me. I've always said I wanted to speak that language so that I could do what I'm doing now, which is build companies that go and accomplish these things. And in these companies, there are incredibly talented chemists, chemical engineers, material scientists, Nelumbo, and anything else that I'll work on. But so I wouldn't go. So this is a long way of saying I wouldn't go back myself with the intention of going into the field of chemical engineering as an engineer myself, because I think other people are much better at that than me. But if there was some particular goal or thing that I wanted to build where it became clear that I needed to brush up on the knowledge of the skills or go way deeper in one area, I may go back for completing the undergrad and then get a master's in something, for example. I'm not opposed to that. But for me, it's all about what's the goal that you want to go after? What's the dream that you're building for? And what is it that enables you to get there? I haven't felt that it's been a limiting factor on me doing what I'm doing now, but I'm open-minded to the idea that it could be for something I do in the future.
Well, there's just a few famous billionaire CEOs that dropped out of college, just a few examples.
Yeah, mostly computer science guys, though. I think there's very few of us that dropped out of chemical engineering.
Oh,
so
you'll be the first one. Tell us the listeners what happened. So, were you going through school, and walk us into how this happened? And you came up with Nelumbo, and you decided, okay, I'm going to start this company. Yeah, walk us through it.
Well, it wasn't me alone by any stretch of the imagination. So I was working with Lance, who is now the CTO and VP of Business Development at Nelumbo, and one of our 3 co-founders.
Wow,
we were working in a lab there.
Those 2 usually don't go together. VP of Sales and CTO. That's an odd combo.
Yeah, with what we do, it's so technical in nature.
I see.
That both of us were frequently finding that Lance is a PhD, and he was doing his postdoc at Berkeley. Lance's very deep technical expertise and salesmanship, because he's very, very good with people as well, was necessary in order to communicate what it was we did at a deeply technical level to ultimately get to the sale we wanted. So
great combination. Wow.
Yeah,
deadly combo.
Absolutely a power player. Absolutely.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get you off track. So you meet Lance.
No problem. Yeah. It's a pretty simple story. We were working together at Cal. We were working in something called the Design for Nanomanufacturing Lab, which goes back to what I was talking about earlier. My interests in how do you actually fundamentally manipulate matter in order to make much more powerful products. And nanomanufacturing, nanotechnology is the broader term, has been around for a long time, but that hasn't really manifested in products in the real world yet, in a really big way. And in fact, the definition of nanotechnology is kind of warped and changed over time as well. But we were working together, and we were working on several different projects. And both of us were very clear with each other from very early on that our interests were going out there and building companies that brought new technology to the real world, and that the kind of academic environment was a stepping stone for us. So both of us were there for the same reason. We had aligned interests. We worked super well together. We had complementary skill sets. And one of the projects that we were working on started to show some, it was reaching the top of what was academically viable. So it was going to either need to stop, or it was going to need to transition into a new environment. And we decided to take the latter option and go out there and start the commercialization process. And around the time we were doing that, we got involved in a competition to try and get some initial cash for the company.
Okay.
And we were assigned this advisor, Dave Walther, who's now our 3rd co-founder and the president of the company and oversees our whole engineering team. And Dave had just finished a 10-year stint with Cobalt Technologies, which was a renewable chemicals company in the clean tech field. He was their first employee. He was there through 4 rounds of financing, and he ultimately was their SVP of engineering and was there as the company was sold to an acquirer. So he'd seen the full process of doing one of these, and we worked with him really well. So he was an advisor for, I think, about a month. And then at one point in time, the 3 of us were sitting in this conference room, stuff all over the whiteboards around us, talking at a million miles a minute about all these different ideas and opportunities and challenges that we had. And it became very clear in that moment, like, hey, this is the co-founding team, this group of us. And so all 3 of us left what we were doing, quit our jobs, dropped out, all these things. And the company was incorporated in May of 2016. And we won that competition, which is actually the first cash into the company.
What was the cash amount? Can you tell us?
Yeah, it was $100,000. And that's a pretty steep amount for a pitch competition. But it's always challenging to, I'll put it this way. If you're working with universities, figure out what their budgetary approval process is, because this is a competition through Berkeley. It was sponsored by Berkeley. And it turns out that their approval up to $99,999.99 can be done at the school level. The moment you click into $100,000, you have to approve it at the Regency or the chancellor's level. And so it goes from the school into the entire University of California system. So it took us quite a while to get that cash in, even after we'd won it and we had the big fake check. So that's my word of warning is, yeah, figure out
how did you live? Well, did you guys just bootstrap it? I mean, you had your own cash, you're living on ramen noodles in an apartment, or what?
Yeah,
how did you?
We pretty much, we were so convinced about the team and the potential of what we were doing that we all moved. Well, Dave already lived in South Bay, but Lance and I moved down to East Palo Alto and lived in a super low cost. So this is about an hour and a half south of Berkeley. Lived in a super low cost place there together. So we moved in together and we rented a very small 800 square foot room, about a 5-minute walk from where we lived, in the kind of Menlo Park area by the Dumbarton Bridge. And in that 800 square feet, we grew from 3 people into 6 or 7 people at one point. And it was everything from our warehouse to our operations center to our R&D lab to our production facility to our offices. So we literally, by the time we left there, we were at a point where someone would stand up from their desk and go walk over to do an experiment, and someone else would sit down at their desk and just keep working. It was like just total hot swapping. And we needed to get out of there. So by the time we left, we were bursting at the seams. But at first, it seemed like a lot of space.
Wow. So how long before revenue did you have to, how many times did you have to raise cash? How much cash did you raise? 2-part question there. How many times did you have to raise it, and how much did you raise before you actually got to revenue?
Yeah. So our company we've developed 2 distinct product lines. Both of those product lines are entering the market next year. And so the revenues that we've seen have come from development partners that have basically joined us for the journey and have helped to fund and they've received some sort of, initial access or first right to market or whatnot. And they've basically helped to fund and say, we believe in this. We think this is incredibly valuable. We want to be the ones that help make this real and get a kind of cut of the first action. So until the first revenues from kind of development partners or commercialization partners, we were working at it for at least a solid 18 months from founding, if I'm remembering correctly. And then, and those numbers, they can be small at first. It's a trickle, but then once you've kind of identified who you really want to be working with and you work at building the relationships and you're really making convincing progress, which we were and we are, then those numbers can get a lot bigger. So I would say we didn't really get to some of our breakthrough deals until 2 to 2.5 years into the company, even if there were some payments that came before that.
Can you share how much cash you've raised so far? Is that super private?
Oh yeah, no. We've raised $19.5 million in private funding. And we've done, thank you. And we've done several million in grants. So public funding, some from the California state, some from federal. These are all public. We've made announcements about them. Again, I apologize for this video. I will need to be picking up a new cable after our conversation today. But yeah, 19.5 million in basically two rounds of financing.
I see. Okay.
Good.
Very good. So you haven't spent it all yet, right? You're hanging.
No, we have not spent it all.
And you project revenue starting, what'd you say? Next year or late this year? What'd you say? I can't remember what you said there.
All going according to plan. We'll have elements that we can launch next year that will be initial product sales. And this is a matter of, the products that we make are we're making new materials, and so they need to go through both the qualification process where a customer, an OEM or a brand qualifies that the materials have the performance that they're looking for, qualifies that they have the durability they're looking for, qualifies that they, have no toxic, chemicals in them that they don't want to be using. And then after that, or in parallel to that, you have to go through a design phase where it's like, okay, once a company's convinced that we can use these materials and they will do what we believe they're going to do, then it's okay, how do we integrate them with our product? And if necessary, how do we integrate production with our production? So that's kind of where we are today. Is we've built these products, we've developed them, we've tested and validated them for a very significant period of time and at the highest level. We've convinced customers, OEMs and brands that these products are going to change the way that you can do things or change your product substantially. They're going through that qualification process and looking at production and assessing what scale up looks like. And we have deals in place for going to market. So we're working through the phases of that right now.
Okay. Layman terms, give the listeners who have no idea what you're talking about as far as what you're making, just a regular guy. What will your technology do to a product? Can you give us like a specific example of like, I don't know, what it'll do to a mic or whatever example you want to give?
Yeah, of course. So just in zooming out before we zoom in on that question, what Nelumbo is doing is enabling the electrification transition to continue occurring at a faster clip, and making sure that we are not reliant on toxic chemicals in the 21st century for the products that we build.
Okay.
The problem that's at the nexus of those two things is that existing solutions for frost, water, and ice, which are things that obviously occur naturally in the environment, but impact and hold back many products that we interact with. There's no really well-developed solution today. The ones that do exist are water repellent and breathable. You might be familiar with membrane-based technologies or Vortex, but these typically rely on perfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, which we now know to be toxic, carcinogenic, immunosuppressive. So these are cancer causing, they make you sicker. And in some cases, PFAS actually has led to declining fertility rates in men. So these are really things that we want to get out of our product, but we have no great substitute solution. And at the same time, many of the heating and cooling technologies that we use, so air conditioners would be the term that most viewers will be aware of. Heat pumps are another one, and heat pumps are actually the most globally used system outside of the US. Many of these products are made fundamentally more inefficient, both from an energy perspective and from actually using them, from the operation of them, from the development of frost and ice. So if we can create a technology that substantially decreases or eliminates the development of frost and ice on these materials, we can enable them to be much more effective energy-wise. We can enable them to be smaller and lighter. And we can enable them to run for a longer period of time so that they can be more effective in the business that they're being used by. So let me now bring it to the
thank you
question that you asked. Of course. It's a little bit of a complex story because we've innovated on the materials, but we're integrating them with products that it changes the way that the product actually functions in its given environment. So one example I can give is that electric vehicles have needed
Okay.
to adopt heat pumps, which is again this heating and cooling system, in order to heat and cool the battery. This is the first time they've needed to do this because previously internal combustion engines were available and you could just use the heat from that to heat the cabin of the car. But the critical bottleneck for these heat pumps is that they develop frost and ice in cold climates. This is one of the big reasons that Teslas have this 40 to 50% reduction in range that you see in Norway. And there's a lot of stories about this.
I
So
see.
by solving the frost and ice problem with a high performance, durable, non-toxic solution, we can make that system more effective, which affects the overall range potential of an electric vehicle in cold climates. So again, going back to the original thing I said, that by solving this kind of arcane, very technical problem, Nelumbo can really encourage the electrification transition more quickly. I'll give you one more example. That same type of system, the electric vehicle heat pump, that was taken from the stationary heat pump, which is basically an air conditioner you can run in both directions. You can use it to both heat and cool your house.
Mhm.
And it's powered by electricity. It's not powered by natural gas. So heat pumps are the replacement product option for natural gas fired furnaces, which is one of the ways that you heat your home.
Mhm.
But again, heat pumps have this critical problem that they cannot function well in cold climates. So right now they are limited from adoption in the US and in many other countries because still the natural gas fired furnace is currently a cheaper option and more reliable because you don't have this problem of frost generation. You just need to burn natural gas to generate heat. If Nelumbo can help to solve this cold climate frost and ice problem for heat pumps, we can dramatically expand the addressable market for stationary heat pumps and again, encourage a faster transition to full electrification. This is already happening. California, for example, has mandated that for new builds, you cannot have natural gas even running to the home. So every appliance must be electrified.
Didn't know
And
that.
there are other countries and states that are following suit with that example.
Wow.
It seems to be the preferred direction, but there's still this inability for the industry to deploy heat pumps everywhere the way that it wants to. So we help that to happen.
Are heat pump manufacturers and Tesla two of your target customers?
Both of those are highly interested in solving this problem. It's a tough problem. It's something that we've designed around it for a very long time. We basically accepted that when you make something cold, frost and ice will start to build on it, and we've created lots of hassle to build around that problem. Nelumbo goes right for the problem and solves it with a new material, which is a very unique approach compared to what has been done before.
Very good. I appreciate that overview. So how's the pressure right now from the cash you've raised to get to revenue? Are you feeling pressure? Talk to us about the stress of that, how you're dealing with investors, the kind of phone calls you get. Now, I know that some of your investors are going to listen to this, so you got to say nice things about them, but
no, I don't have to. But I will, because we've selected partners and in part partners have selected us, funding partners that understand what we're doing and are supportive of really big transformational change, even if it will take time to get there. Okay. So, they trust us that we have the technical expertise. They trust us that we have the operations expertise and the strategy to go after these opportunities and to be making the right steps towards them. And our investors and our board are mostly focused on how can we bring the best possible resources and opportunity to the company, whether that's rounds of funding, whether that's specific strategic partnerships. And we spend the vast majority of our time talking about that, rather than, and I have seen this in other cases, second guessing development pathways or second guessing, is this the right product to go after? Like, we have the trust of our supporters that we have selected the right things because we know the most about it. We've been building in this space for more than 5 years now. And I feel very, very honored for that. I mean, we spent the time to get to know funders before we brought them onto the company. And this is one of the things we look for, but it's never perfect. When you're doing a funding round, you can always accidentally bring somebody in that, turns out they either don't have your best interest at heart or they just don't quite get it. And I don't feel that we have that issue at Nelumbo. I feel that our challenges and our issues are always focused on the fact that this is actually just a really hard problem to solve. And we have some pretty tough markets that we're trying to scale in and change. And that's our challenge. And we can just focus on that rather than worrying about all the like politics, for example, that can occur at a board level and that would be personally really unsatisfying to be a part of. I don't have to deal with any of that. So the pressure is always there, but it's definitely a huge part of it's self-imposed. And we're learning all the time how to go faster, and that's kind of what we try to focus on.
If you had to give one or two tips to an aspiring entrepreneur listening to this episode that is about to start raising cash, they haven't raised any yet, but they're getting ready. Anything you want to tell them? You touched on the importance of selecting the right people to be around and work with, but beyond that, anything you want to share?
I'm not sure that I have any breakthrough advice that's going to be radically better than what's already out there, because some of it is you can read it and go, okay, yeah, that makes sense, and then once you experience it, you're like, oh, that now I feel that viscerally, and so I'm gonna, I learned from it a little. You're gonna learn from it a little bit differently that way. But I think spending the time to pick the funding partners that you really believe are going to be, incentivized the same way you are for the long run. Recognizing that right now we're in a period of time where the world is awash in capital, and so this isn't always true, but right now there is almost definitely going to be someone else willing to take the call, even if you say no to the current investor that you're considering. So you don't. I've just seen a lot of people take deals because they think it's the only deal that they can get, and right now that just doesn't seem to be true. There's a lot of opportunity out there.
Mm-hmm.
Know why you're raising the money and from whom, and have your outcomes pretty well as you can identified. Definitely don't be raising money just to raise money. Don't raise money because your friends are raising money. If you hang around other entrepreneurs, really try to characterize your business and figure out what its needs are. Because the worst thing is maybe not the worst thing, but a bad thing, an unhelpful thing is to realize after you've taken a substantial amount of money that you're building a business that doesn't match the incentives of the funders that you've brought on. Because then you just have a very painful situation that you're kind of obligated to. So just be aware of that.
You've had to learn how to be a CEO on the fly. From a very young age, which is super challenging. It's hard to be a CEO, period. It's hard to run a company, very difficult job. Really hard when you're a young man that didn't get a chance to come up in the ranks of another company and have years and years of mentoring before you were thrown into it. What advice would you give to a young CEO kind of caught in the same situation where they woke up one day and they're like, oh shit, I got 30 employees. I guess I better figure out how to be a CEO.
Yeah. So I actually like that situation a lot more than the situation of, well, I'm going to start a company because I want to be a CEO. I think that's a pretty poor motivation. I mean it's not just not the right reasons. So the situation of, oh crap, I went after this thing I really believed in, and now there's 30 employees and we're making money, or we're not making money, and we got to figure out what to do, and I got to really step it up and be a real CEO. I think that's like a pretty healthy, natural thing, even if it feels incredibly scary. But I apologize. Your question was, what advice would I have?
Yeah, what advice would you give those? They're having that scary moment. They're in that situation where either revenue started or something happened. There was a pivot point where they had a couple of co-founders they were having to deal with, and that's fine because they like drinking beer with those guys, and that's all cool because they've been friends for a long time. But then boom, all of a sudden they got 20 people they're supervising, and they've never really been in that large of a management role.
Yeah. Lots of advice. We could fill a whole podcast with it, but one thing that's really important to remember is that the CEO role is a role. It's not who you are. And so there may be times where you are playing the part of the CEO because you need it to be perceived a certain way. And then there's times where, even with your own team, where you can be more of yourself, and that's okay. You don't always have to occupy kind of one preordained role of the way that society sees a CEO. And in fact, some of the more effective ones that I've met are able to very fluidly figure out which characteristics are the most helpful for getting the outcomes that we want to see in different situations. But are never straying very far from who they actually are. So you get that sense of authenticity, which is, I think, pretty important and pretty special. But I would, just to go directly to your question, recognize that there are, particularly right now, a lot of people probably going through something similar to you, and go find those people in those groups and learn from them. Because it's if you make it a solo job, it'll be miserable and you'll probably be less successful. Recognize that if you've raised money and started to hire a team, your job first and foremost is people management, which is a horrific term, but it is making sure everyone understands what we are trying to do, and then making sure that people are in the right places to be the most successful in what they can do well towards that goal. And that is way harder to actually do in practice than it sounds. But a lot of people that have, first-time CEOs don't realize for a long time that, like, they're not actually supposed to continue doing individual contributor work. Like they just will kind of keep cranking with their normal habits, and they won't change in that regard. Recognize that at times you do need to be the one that is standing up and confidently representing the direction that the company is going to go, and is providing that confidence to everybody else. And that will feel very scary to you, but you need to make sure that that is clearly and as confidently as you can communicated, because people need that. And that is one of the aspects of the role of CEO. And then, man, let's see, I'm rambling a little bit here.
That's okay.
There's so many different thoughts coming to mind.
Yeah, we could do a whole episode on it. I'll just take a pause right there and emphasize, if you are starting a company, if you want to start a company because you made something, you created something, a product, a software, or maybe you're a service provider because you're a good electrician or plumber or whatever, and you started a company. If you want to scale that company, you will quickly turn into a people manager and a leader, and you won't be doing the tactical thing yourself. And if you're not comfortable with that, if you're not ready for that, if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to be a coach and a leader, then you shouldn't scale it up, because that's what your job's going to be. You won't be in the R&D science lab creating the thing anymore. You'll be managing and hiring and developing the team that does that for you. So you will quickly turn into a leader of people. And that's what your job will be, very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. I want to ask you a couple of outside the lines questions really quick, kind of moving into some topics that I think are facing CEOs. Before I do that, though, one more time, I just want to make sure we get this in here. Nelumbo.io is where you can go to learn more about the company. Are you in the middle of a cash raise, by the way? Are you interested in talking to further investors, or were you doing anything currently?
Always interested in talking to investors if you think that they're aligned with us. There's been a lot more activity, but there's still relatively little activity in the deep tech space compared to the overall ecosystem. So always interested in aligned investors. We don't have an open cash raise at this moment. We have a couple of, I will call them strategic discussions that are underway that may precipitate into something like that in fairly short order, though. So it's a good time to get to know us.
Okay. And Liam Berryman as well. You can find him on LinkedIn and connect with him there and drop him a note. Okay.
Yeah, I would actually say our website is a little bit out of date at this point. We've focused on building a couple of things that have been not announced, that have been behind the scenes working with confidential partners. So if you come to me directly and get to know us, I can provide some more info about that, but it won't be available on our website right now. And by the
Okay.
time it's on our website, it'll be too late to get involved.
Okay, very good. I want to ask you a couple of questions here that I think are facing CEOs in today's world. First one is, what's your take on remote work, hiring remote employees versus making employees come to the office? What are you currently doing, and where do you see that going?
My answer will be a little bit easier, I think, than some other folks. We're a company that has been predominantly research, development, and engineering based in terms of resources and resource allocation, and with a growing fraction focused on business development within the past 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
And so the vast majority of our employees actually need to be at some kind of lab or production facility in
Mm-hmm.
order to do their jobs. So, we had a lot of changes around and a lot of things to figure out during COVID, but now our policy is, please be in the office unless you absolutely don't need to be in the office, because all you're doing, for example, is processing some data or creating a presentation, then you can work from home. So it's a flexible strategy, but with the default and the emphasis on being in the office. And then to the management team, who by and large are not collecting data, and so they could be working remote more consistently, we've asked them to, again, with the majority of their days, be in the facility as a show of support to the entire team. So I'd say, we probably see 80 to 90% attendance from our entire company at our headquarters in Hayward and our satellite facility down there every day of the week. And then people have this option if they need to, go to an appointment, they can just do the rest of their day remote, or if they are just working on stuff they can work on at home, they can work remote. But we've tried to keep our culture centered on the office only for the reason that a bunch of our employees do need to be there. And we don't want them to feel like they've been abandoned or anything like that, right? We want them to get that support. And we enjoy the experience of being in the office,
Gotcha.
being together as a team. So
how about this one? Touchy subject with the COVID and the masks and the vaccinations. And, I guess, you got the Biden administration was going to roll out this mandate recently. And then now the Supreme Court's like, nah, you can't do that. And then, and then I see some CEOs that were gonna force some rules, and now some CEOs are backing off, and some other CEOs are just kind of like staying in neutral and kind of like, okay, let's just wait and see. It's a tough one, I think. First of all, like we said, running a company as a CEO on a regular day is tough. Throw in stuff like this, and you're like, okay, most CEOs are like, holy crap, I'm just trying to get through my day here. What are your thoughts? What do you see happening? What are you doing?
Yeah, so first of all, this is one of the things that, because we're not a public company right now, I get the luxury of being a CEO that doesn't necessarily need to respond to constant media inquiry. I'm fairly certain at some point in time I'll be the chief executive of a public company, but just because that's a pretty natural route to go for when you're building things and you want to take them to a conclusion or to an outcome. But right now, we don't have to answer to any particular media inquiry or anything like that. Yeah, I mean, it just gives us more flexibility in being able to actually do the right thing without all of the assessment of like how to interpret this decision that we've made. But we very clearly have not put in place a vaccine mandate at our company. It's been voluntary. If people want to let us know, they can. And we have done, I think, 2 anonymous polls of, what's your vaccination status, that we've had, pretty much full responses to, from what I can recall. Given that we're mostly in person, I think most people have felt like they just want to get it done because that's, they're happy to do it and there's no reason not to from their perspective. But thankfully, we've not needed to do anything. We haven't needed to enforce anything at this point in time, and don't really hold a view. If I was CEO of a company of 1,000 people, I'd probably have a different take on this, and it'd be a well-defined document, and I'd have had legal clear it before I'd be talking about you about it. But we're a team of 20 people. We all look out for each other. We're all like, it's this remote work policy. So also if you're even feeling bad, like just don't come into the office, like work from home or just take the day off. And if you've tested positive, like, you're taking 5 days at home working from there. We'll send you data, or you'll just take the time off if you're not feeling well. And so we've always just been flexible and figured out what worked for people, and haven't needed to, or haven't had any requests to enforce anything, which has just kept it nice.
Fair enough. One more sensitive one.
Please. No, ask all the sensitive ones you want.
By the way, for the record, no matter how you feel about vaccinations and masks, and I'm talking to the listeners right now, no matter what side of the fence you're on about any of this stuff, surely 99% of the people listening to this episode, surely we all want to get together and hang out and have fun and go to pubs and hug and shake hands and have beers. I know I do.
Yeah. Yeah. It was actually a big relief when we could open up the facility again, because I'm not going to go into all the dynamics of a team, but like it was just a really healthy thing for us to be back together, and that was very fortunate. We are
social creatures. I'm pretty sure we're not meant to live in little caves by ourselves.
Right.
Another last sensitive one, and then we'll do the wrap it up. What do you think about CEOs going on social media? I think I already know your answer. Some of these CEOs, they go on social media and they take sides on sensitive topics, and they blast out their opinions on stuff, not just COVID. I mean, whatever the hot topic is of the month, they go on and they're if the topic's like, what color is better, purple or yellow? They're like, purple's better. And if you like yellow, then you're bad, or whatever.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
You probably already picked this up. I'm pretty against anything that's extremely divisive, and trying to bucket us all into camps of this or that.
Camps.
I get that it's necessary sometimes. I get people want to be playing for a team. I would love to see a world where like Team America is the one that most people in this country want to be a part of, versus some smaller relative fraction of that. I don't think it's the world we live in anymore, sadly. Given that that's not the world we live in anymore, I can understand why people try to become the kind of king of their own fiefdom by putting forward strong views and then seeing who will follow that. That's not an approach that I think is very interesting or exciting to me personally, but I understand why people do it. It's a pursuit of power thing to an extent. I would hope that we have enough still strong-willed, still powerful people that are looking a little bit longer term than that kind of approach right now. And I'm not commenting on this, not looking at it from any particular side or angle or perspective or political party or aisle or whatever, just from the intense divisiveness doesn't seem to be helpful for all of us. So, stirring that up to get attention on you is just not something that's in my style or that I'm interested in. But like I said, I can logically understand why it might be valuable to somebody else to do. There's an incentive to do it. So
you answered just about like I thought you would. Great answer, by the way. Love it. Last question. Thanks. I know we're out of time. Right now at this stage in your life, if you had to, by the way, congratulations on getting engaged.
Thank you.
Same girlfriend that you had when I interviewed you the first time, I'm assuming.
As far as I can remember, yeah. Yes. We've been together it'll be 9 years in April.
That's great. I'm super happy for you.
Thank you.
If you had to define your core purpose in life now, moving forward, and you had to put your quote core purpose into like a sentence, what would that sound like?
So my core purpose in life is to build, enable others, and live my own incredible dreams. And I connect all of those things together. So I constantly want to be building things ever since I was a kid. It's not just physically building things, but building uh, building organizations, building people, building teams, building towards vision. Those are the things that kind of get me up, that aspect of building and that feeling of that we're making progress, we're doing something together, and it's really worthwhile. Enabling others, that second part goes hand in hand with that to me. I don't think the building happens without enabling others. And so it's something I do my best to wake up every day and think about, what can I do to enable my current fiance, future spouse? What can I do to enable my family? What can I do to enable my friends and the businesses that I'm working on? Like, how can I take those to, such a cliche term, but how can I take those to the next level? Like, what is it that might be blocking people? What is it that they might be worried about? What can I do to alleviate those things and help them get to whatever they want to get to? And then living incredible dreams is the last part. Like, I think that's one of the big purposes of life. I'm not going to make a big philosophical or metaphysical statement about it, but I think that, finding out what your dreams are and then living them or creating them or making them happen is like one of the best things you could possibly do. And I want to do that not just for myself, but I want to enable that for others. So others individually and others like as a group of people moving towards a consistent goal. So that's the sentence that would come to mind for me. That's how I would state it.
Good stuff, my friend. Liam, thank you so much for being on the Riderflex podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me, Steve. It was a pleasure. Looking forward to coming back.